My name is Emily, and if you'd asked me to describe my life a few years ago, I might have told you it was a roller coaster. But roller coasters have their ups, and my story was more like a series of plunges into darkness. It all started when I was 11, a time when most kids are thinking about friends and school. For me, it was the beginning of a long, painful journey. My father had been sick for a while, battling a disease that sapped his strength and took away his laughter. When he died, it was as if the world tilted beneath my feet. My mother, Rachel, was a teacher who tried her best, but her grief was a heavy shroud. We lived in a small house in Austin, Texas, and though it wasn't much, it had been our home. But with my father gone, everything seemed to change. I remember how my mother's face looked after the funeral, pale and tired. She struggled to keep it together, and I wished I could do something to help her. Instead, it felt like I was a burden she could barely manage. Not long after my father's passing, things took a turn I wasn't ready for. Rachel met Tom, a construction foreman in his early 50s. He came into our lives like a storm, bringing with him an aura of control and coldness that I couldn't understand. Tom moved in quickly, and from the start, he made it clear that he had no room for me in his life. His presence was a constant reminder that I was somehow out of place. Tom set strict rules and was always quick to criticize me. I remember one evening, I spilled some juice on the kitchen table, and his anger was explosive. My mother, still numb from grief, didn't defend me. Her silence was a stark contrast to Tom's harsh words, and I felt like I was shrinking in the corner of our home. It was clear that Tom resented me, and it only grew worse when my mother became pregnant. When Sophie was born, things got even more tense. Tom's frustration over the added financial strain was evident. He often mentioned how expensive it was to support 2 children, and I could sense his growing bitterness. My mother, overwhelmed by her own emotions and the new baby, didn't have much left to offer in terms of support for me. The breaking point came one day when Tom suggested that I be sent to live with my Aunt Martha. I'd heard of Aunt Martha before. She was known for being strict and unyielding. My mother's face was full of regret, but she didn't fight Tom's decision. It felt like I was being cast aside, and the pain of being abandoned by my mother was unbearable. "Emily, it's for the best," my mother said softly, but her words didn't soothe the ache inside me. "Aunt Martha will take good care of you." I was heartbroken. The thought of leaving my home, my room, and everything I knew was overwhelming. But I had no choice. The next few days were a blur of packing and goodbyes that didn't feel like they were good at all. Aunt Martha's house was a world away from what I had known. Located in a different part of Austin, it was an old, imposing building that seemed to echo with rules and expectations. Aunt Martha was in her early 60s and had retired from her career, but her stern demeanor was as strong as ever. She welcomed me with a cold efficiency, and it was clear that I was now just another task for her. Her house was filled with a rigid structure. There were rules for everything: how to fold my clothes, when to eat, and even when to go to bed. Every action was scrutinized, and I felt like I was under constant surveillance. Aunt Martha's reminders about how my mother had sent me away were frequent and painful. One night, feeling utterly alone, I found a way to use Aunt Martha's phone to call my mother. I wanted to hear her voice, to ask her why she had sent me away. When Rachel answered, her response was as cold as the silence that had followed Tom's arrival. "You can't come home, Emily," she said without emotion. "It's better this way." The rejection was like a punch to the gut. My mother's words left me feeling more isolated than ever. I couldn't understand why she had chosen to let me go so easily. Aunt Martha found out about the call and was furious. She imposed even stricter rules, punishing me for daring to reach out. My days became a blur of following rules and avoiding conflict. I learned quickly that expressing any emotion could result in more punishment. It was a survival strategy, but it took its toll on me. As the months passed, Aunt Martha's patience wore thin. A year later, she announced that I would have to leave. Rachel had stopped sending the financial support that was supposed to cover my stay. With nowhere else to go, I was left waiting for the next chapter of my uncertain life. And so, I was sent to live with my grandmother Carol. Little did I know that this change would mark the beginning of a new and unexpected chapter. When I arrived at my grandmother Carol's house, it was like stepping into a different world. Her home was a cozy, warm place on the outskirts of Austin. It was a far cry from Aunt Martha's cold, imposing house. Carol was in her mid-70s, a retired nurse with a gentle but firm demeanor. Despite her age, she moved with a grace that made her home feel inviting. Grandma Carol welcomed me with open arms. I could see the kindness in her eyes and feel the warmth in her hug. It was the first real comfort I'd felt in a long time. Carol had a way of making everything seem better, even though she was strict in her own way. There were rules, of course, but they felt less like punishment and more like a way to bring order to our lives. "You'll have your own room," she said, showing me around. "I want you to feel at home here." For the first time in what felt like forever, I felt a flicker of hope. Carol treated me with respect and kindness, but she also maintained clear boundaries. I had my own space, and I was given responsibilities that made me feel like a valued member of the household. The transition wasn't entirely easy, but it was a relief compared to the harsh environment I'd come from. One of the first things Carol did was to enroll me in a new school. I was nervous but also excited. The change of environment was daunting, but Grandma's encouragement gave me the confidence to try my best. School became a place where I could escape my worries and focus on something positive. I threw myself into my studies, driven by a newfound determination to succeed. As time went on, Carol became more than just a guardian. She became my rock. She never treated me like a burden or a charity case. Instead, she helped me see my own potential. With her support, I started to excel in school, discovering a passion for engineering. I worked hard, knowing that this was my chance to build a future for myself. Carol's health, however, was a constant concern. Despite her warm demeanor, she was often tired and sometimes needed help with daily tasks. I took on more responsibilities around the house, managing everything from cooking to keeping track of her medication. I was determined to take care of her as she had taken care of me. By the time I was in high school, I was thriving academically. Grandma's support was crucial, and I knew that if it weren't for her, I wouldn't have come this far. She encouraged me to pursue my dreams, and I set my sights on becoming an engineer. It was a challenging path, but it felt right. Graduation day was a proud moment. Grandma Carol was there, cheering me on. I could see the pride in her eyes as I walked across the stage to receive my diploma. It was a culmination of years of hard work and her unwavering support. I was accepted into a reputable university, and the future seemed full of possibilities. College was a whirlwind of classes, projects, and social activities. Balancing academics with a part-time job to help support myself was tough, but I was determined to make the most of it. Grandma's letters and occasional visits were a source of comfort and motivation. She'd always remind me of the importance of perseverance and hard work. One day, while working on a particularly challenging engineering project, I received a letter from Grandma Carol. She was proud of my achievements and reassured me that I was on the right path. Her words were like a warm hug from afar, and they gave me the strength to push through the toughest moments. Years went by, and I graduated with honors. By the age of 34, I had achieved my goal of becoming a successful engineer. The feeling of accomplishment was immense, but it was tinged with sadness because Carol wasn't there to see the fruits of her encouragement. She had grown older and her health had declined, and we had to face the reality that time was running out. Carol's passing was a devastating blow. Losing her felt like losing a part of myself. The funeral was a somber affair, but it was also a testament to the love and respect she had earned from everyone who knew her. I found comfort in knowing that she had lived a full life, and I was grateful for every moment we had shared. However, the real shock came after the funeral. As I was dealing with my grief, my estranged family reappeared. My mother, Rachel, Tom, and Sophie, now 22, showed up out of the blue. They were demanding a share of the $2 million inheritance that Grandma Carol had left to me. The audacity of their appearance and their demands was jarring. I was furious. How could they come back after all these years, after everything they had done, and demand a share of what was rightfully mine? Grandma Carol had legally adopted me, making the inheritance mine alone. I was determined not to let them take advantage of my grief. The confrontation was tense. My family's presence felt like an intrusion into my moment of mourning. The scene that followed was chaotic, and it was clear that they were prepared to fight for a piece of what they believed they were entitled to. I had to stand firm. It was not just about money. It was about principle and respect for the family who had truly cared for me. And so, the stage was set for a showdown that would test my resolve and the strength I had built over the years. The day after Grandma Carol's funeral, I woke up to find Rachel, Tom, and Sophie already at the house. They had arrived early and were in the process of unpacking their belongings into the rooms Carol had left behind. It was as if they had simply taken over, treating the house as if it were theirs by right. My heart raced with a mixture of anger and disbelief. "Emily, we need to talk," Rachel said, her tone flat and demanding. Her eyes, which had once been warm and loving, now looked cold and calculating. Tom stood behind her, his presence looming and intimidating, while Sophie, now a young woman, looked uncomfortable but resolute. "I don't think there's anything to talk about," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "This house and the inheritance belong to me. Grandma Carol made sure of that. You have no right to any of it." Rachel's face hardened. "We're family, Emily. We have a right to share in what Carol left behind. She was my mother, too." Tom added, "We've fallen on hard times. We need this. It's only fair that we get something from what's rightfully ours." I could feel the anger bubbling up inside me. How dare they show up after all these years and claim what was mine? "You can't just waltz in here and expect to take what doesn't belong to you," I said firmly. "Carol legally adopted me, and everything she left is mine." Rachel's eyes flashed with anger. "I can't believe you're being so selfish. We're your family. We deserve a share of that money." It was clear that Rachel wasn't going to back down easily, and neither was Tom. Sophie seemed to be caught in the middle, her uncertainty reflecting the tension in the room. I knew I had to stand my ground, but the confrontation was emotionally draining. I decided to call a lawyer to get legal advice on how to handle the situation. Carol had meticulously planned everything, and I needed to make sure I was following her wishes and protecting my rights. The lawyer's office was a sanctuary of calm amid the chaos. He reviewed Carol's will and confirmed that everything was in order. The inheritance was legally mine, and my family had no claim to it. With this reassurance, I returned home with renewed determination. Rachel, Tom, and Sophie were still there, trying to make themselves at home. I faced them, holding the lawyer's letter in my hand. "I've spoken to a lawyer," I said. "Everything is in order. Carol's will is clear. The inheritance is mine alone." Rachel's face turned a deep shade of red. "You can't do this to us, Emily. We're desperate. Don't you have any compassion?" "I do have compassion," I said, trying to keep my voice calm despite the anger boiling inside me. "But compassion doesn't mean giving away what isn't mine to give. Grandma Carol wanted me to have this. You had your chance to be part of my life, but you chose not to be there." The tension in the room was palpable. Tom's face was set in a scowl, and Rachel's eyes were filled with frustration. Sophie looked like she wanted to say something but seemed too intimidated to speak up. Things escalated quickly. Tom and Rachel began making threats, insisting that they would take what they felt they deserved. Their presence was becoming unbearable. It was clear that they weren't going to leave quietly, and I couldn't allow them to continue treating my home as their own. I knew I had to take action. I called the police to report the intrusion and asked them to remove Rachel, Tom, and Sophie from the property. When the officers arrived, I explained the situation, showing them the lawyer's letter and the eviction notice. The officers were sympathetic and agreed that the situation needed to be resolved. The confrontation with the police was tense but necessary. Rachel and Tom argued and protested, but the officers were firm. "You need to leave," one of them said. "You're trespassing." Rachel's face was a mix of anger and disbelief as she gathered her things. "You haven't heard the last of this, Emily," she spat out. "We'll be back." Sophie, who had been quiet throughout, gave me a sad look before leaving with her parents. It was clear that she was caught in the middle of this family drama, but her departure didn't lessen the weight of the situation for me. With my family gone, I was left alone to process everything. The house felt emptier than ever, and the grief of losing Carol was compounded by the stress of dealing with my family's demands. I knew I had to focus on honoring Carol's memory and moving forward, but it was challenging with the emotional turmoil I was experiencing. The ordeal had taken a toll on me, but it also solidified my resolve. I was determined not to let my toxic family undermine the stability and happiness I had found with Grandma Carol. It was time to rebuild and find a way to live my life on my own terms, despite the obstacles that had been thrown my way. The days following the eviction were a whirlwind of emotions. My home, which had been a battleground just days before, now felt like a quiet sanctuary where I could finally breathe. Carol's absence was a void that was difficult to fill, but her legacy was clear. She had provided me with a life of stability and love that I intended to honor. The aftermath of the confrontation with my family left me with a lot to process. The stress of the situation, combined with the grief of losing Grandma Carol, was overwhelming. I spent a lot of time reflecting on everything that had happened, trying to make sense of it all. I found solace in the routine that Carol had established and in the memories of the times we had shared. One of the most important things Carol had left me was the freedom to make my own choices and to live a life that reflected who I had become. The $2 million inheritance was not just money, it was a testament to the love and care Carol had for me. It symbolized the new beginning I had fought so hard to achieve. I decided to use part of the inheritance to create a scholarship fund in Carol's name. The fund was dedicated to helping underprivileged students achieve their dreams, just as Carol had helped me achieve mine. It was a way to give back and ensure that her legacy would continue to impact others positively. Setting up the scholarship fund was a deeply fulfilling experience. It was a way to transform the pain of loss into something meaningful and to carry forward Carol's spirit of generosity and support. As time went on, I focused on rebuilding my life and embracing the future. I continued to work as an engineer, a career I had worked so hard to establish. My professional success was a testament to Carol's support and my own resilience. I also made sure to nurture the friendships and relationships that had become important to me, building a support network that was genuine and caring. Though the pain of my family's actions was still there, it became less overwhelming as I worked through it. I realized that their intrusion had been a test of my strength and boundaries, and I had emerged from it with a renewed sense of self. The confrontation had taught me to stand firm in my convictions and to protect the life I had built for myself. Eventually, I found peace in knowing that I had done everything I could to honor Carol's memory and to ensure that her legacy was preserved. I kept her memory alive through the scholarship fund, and I often visited her grave, where I talked to her about my life and the progress I was making. It was my way of staying connected to her, of sharing my triumphs and struggles. As I moved forward, I also focused on new goals and dreams. I began exploring interests that had been put on hold, such as traveling and pursuing hobbies that I had always wanted to try. Each new experience was a tribute to the life Carol had given me and a way of celebrating the strength I had found within myself. Looking back on my journey, I saw it as a testament to resilience and the power of finding one's own path. My story was one of overcoming adversity and learning to thrive despite the challenges. It was about finding belonging and creating a life filled with purpose and meaning. In the end, my journey was not just about dealing with the fallout of my family's actions, but also about embracing the future and living a life that honored the values and love that Carol had instilled in me. I had faced abandonment and hardship, but I had emerged stronger and more determined to live a life that was true to myself. As I look ahead, I feel a sense of peace and hope. I know that no matter what challenges come my way, I have the strength and resilience to face them. My story is a reminder that even in the face of adversity, it is possible to find belonging, build a meaningful life, and honor the legacy of those who have made a difference.